I'm going to show you a couple things about Google Calendar because some of you may find this as a useful tool to record assignments. There are two different things you can add to your Google Calendar. You can add events or reminders. Now, events are really useful for things like sports events or maybe something like a competition for TSA or Valley Honor Band. For example, I have an oil change coming up on Monday. So I click down here, I know it's at 4 p.m. I clicked at the 4 p.m. and I get this showing up. And I can write oil change. Now, you'll see that there's a drop-down menu here, and I can choose which calendar I want it on. For me, I have a lot of calendars because I have a lot of Google Classrooms, I have a lot of committees I'm a part of, but for an oil change, obviously only I need to know that. If I want to add a little more detail to it, I can click the Edit Event. Now, here is where I can change the day or time. Maybe I think it's going to take an hour. If I want it to happen all day, like the oil change is going to take all day, which it's not, but let's say it was, I would click that tab. Now, I can also change the color. Maybe I'll make it turquoise. That's not a color I use very much in the Google Calendar, and that'll help me remember. If I'm afraid that I'll forget to go to this, I can add a notification. And for me, maybe I put it 40 minutes before the actual event. So what'll happen is on my screen, I'll get a pop-up and it will remind me 40 minutes before that I need to go to take my car for an oil change. And so then I can save that, and you can see that shows up at 4 to 5 p.m. And that's really good for events and things like that. But let's say you want to record something that you have to do for homework. Well, I know on Tuesday that I have to set up a meeting. So see where it gives me an event or reminder. And notice, let me do this again. I clicked up here in the top. That's an all-day thing. So event or reminder. So I want a reminder to set up meeting. Now this gives me a little less options, but it does give me a day to remind me and all day. And then I hit create. And what will happen is on this day, before basically at the beginning of the day, it will remind me. It'll have a little pop-up show up on my computer and say, you need to set up the meeting. And I can then either snooze that and give myself a little time, or if I don't snooze it, I can go set up the meeting and then say, yes, I've already set up that meeting. I find the reminders would be very useful for you for assignments. For me, I have a reminder each week to send an email to the parents who've requested it. And that's just what's going on in our classes. Some of your parents may receive that. And every Friday, about 10 minutes to 3 p.m., I get an update or a reminder and it says, send the weekly email. If I've already sent it that day, I just hit close. If not, I hit snooze and I remember. Now, let's say that I realized later that the meeting is on Wednesday, or maybe I forgot to set up the meeting on Tuesday. I can move that reminder. And when I remove it, what that does is that means on Wednesday, I'll get that same reminder. So if you have an assignment and you're like, you know what, I'm not turning that in today, I need to remember to turn it in, you can move that to the next day. And that's really handy for you if you're turning in something late or if you were absent, things like that. The other neat thing about Google Calendar is if you are a part of a Google Classroom, it immediately puts your assignments in for you that are in Google Classroom. So for instance, in my extensions class, we have a magazine article due on Monday. Well, that's showing up. In my reading class, we have book campaign videos due on Wednesday. And then the weekly challenges always show up. They're due at 3 p.m. It puts that a little reminder at 2:59, but that's the weekly challenges. And so that's really cool to have those. You can also see that I have my Spurs calendar to see when the Spurs are playing. And that's an additional feature if you want to search for other cool calendars. Now, the other cool thing that you may not know is if you have a smartphone or a tablet, you can actually log in to your Google Calendar that way, and it's beautifully integrated. I have an iPhone, and my calendar is integrated into that. And what it happens is on my iPhone, if I have a notification, it'll show right up on my iPhone. So even if I'm not at my computer, I'm still getting those notifications. And this may be something that you find is useful to you. Even if you don't have a tablet or a smartphone, you still, if you're using your computer, this would be very useful to you. Maybe you want your reminders to show up at the beginning of extensions or at the beginning of homeroom. Those are both good times for reminders for you because those are typically times when you have to work on other work instead of having it show up at the beginning of a class where you're like, oh, that was due today and now it's too late to turn it in. So I just want to give you some information about how to use Google Calendar. And if you feel this would be useful to you, this is a way that you can write down your assignments instead of using your planner. Now, does that mean that you don't have to write down your assignments at all? Of course not. You can use your planner or you can use Google Calendar. Either way, you still should be checking in the evenings, well, what are the assignments that I have due? And even if you're not logged into the internet, your Google Calendar will still give you reminders. So that's something to keep in mind. Even if you do not have access to the internet at home, you will still see those reminders on your Google Calendar. Just like if you opened up your planner, you would still see the assignments written down. Whichever way you choose, both of those could be useful to you. I find for myself, I like using Google Calendar. I use it at school. I use a separate calendar at home. And I find that those are very useful to me because I like getting those visual reminders. But you may find that just using a planner works for you. So this is just a tutorial about how to use Google Calendar. See me if you have more questions.